Hey, what's up? Coach E here from Precision Movement, and today we're going to talk about why most common Achilles tendonitis treatment fails and 3 reasons why you get Achilles tendonitis and exercises specifically for each of those reasons. So what is common Achilles tendonitis treatment? Well, if you search online or if you go to your conventional therapist or your doctor, you're going to be told to rest it, stretch it, ice it, maybe take some ibuprofen or Advil and stretch it out. Some other therapists might recommend eccentric exercise specifically, but any kind of calf raise type exercises. And sometimes that protocol will work. So when you're in pain, the RICE protocol, rest, ice, compression, elevation, that helps to decrease the inflammation and help to get you out of the pain. The stretching might do a little bit for the feeling of tension that builds up when you've got an injured muscle or injured tendon. And then the exercises will strengthen the tendon and that muscle, the calves, the gastrocnemius and the soleus. It'll strengthen those muscles. So if your tendonitis is a result of overuse, let's say you started running and you just ramped up your mileage too quickly so that your body wasn't ready for it, specifically in this case, obviously, as your Achilles tendon wasn't ready for whatever it is that you were doing, then resting from that, strengthening the Achilles tendon and the calves, and then going back to that activity might be all you need. And if that's all you need, awesome. That's super simple. Just do that. But if you're watching this, then you've probably tried that and it hasn't worked. So now you got to think about, okay, why do I have Achilles tendonitis in the first place? Now there are 3 reasons for this. The first reason could be due to a lack of dorsiflexion. So dorsiflexion is whenever you lift your toe up like that, decrease the angle at the ankle there, or if the foot is flat on the ground, keeping the foot flat while driving your knee forward that way, that shows how much dorsiflexion that you have. And if you don't have sufficient dorsiflexion for whatever activities it is that you're doing, what you're basically doing, let's say you're running and every time your dorsiflexion goes to there, but to run you need that much, then every time you run you're going to be basically stretching at the end range of motion of the calves and of that Achilles tendon. So when you do that, when you repeatedly stretch, especially under high amounts of forces, then that tendon's going to break down. And even if you strengthen it, because you're lacking that range, you're never going to be able to strengthen it enough because you're just taking it to the weakest area, which is that end range of dorsiflexion. Okay? So what you need to do instead is improve your dorsiflexion. Here's a simple way that you can do that. I'll show it to you right now. Basically, you're going to go into max amount of dorsiflexion right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off and I'm going to lift it off, keeping the dorsiflexion, keeping the tibialis anterior, those muscles, pulling my toe up. And I'm going to keep that activation pattern as I roll over top and get into a little bit more passive stretch, and then I'll back it off again. Active, so I'm strengthening those muscles, and then I'm going back into passive stretch. So I'm lengthening or increasing the range, and then I'm strengthening the muscles and going back and forth, increasing the range, just like that. It's a very simple drill you can do that's gonna improve your dorsiflexion. And you can do 10 repetitions of that, holding the contraction for 2 to 5 seconds. Do that at least every other day to improve dorsiflexion. Okay, so that's a functional way to improve dorsiflexion because we're building the strength in that end range. And that's a simple one. I've got other drills as well. We'll talk about that in a second. Next up, if you have a muscle called the tibialis posterior, well, you do have that muscle, but if that muscle is not working properly, it goes right into here, wraps around the ankle, and then inserts into the bottom of your foot, the ball of your foot, and it contributes to the medial arch. So if you've got flat feet, then it's likely that this tibialis posterior muscle isn't working. So what do you do about that? You've got to get that muscle working, okay? Because if it's not working, then your foot is going to roll over, and what's going to happen is the calves, they're going to try to compensate for this dysfunctional or weak tibialis posterior. Because whenever we have a weakness in a muscle, or we have insufficient range, like you just learned about with the lack of dorsiflexion, your body's got to compensate in some way. So in the case of a dysfunctional or weak tibialis posterior, your brain can try and recruit the calves to do more work to try to compensate for that muscle that's not working. If they're doing more work than they're supposed to, sooner or later they're going to break down. So instead of trying to strengthen the calves, let's try to strengthen the tibialis posterior. And I've got a drill that I love for this specifically. It improves strength of the tibialis posterior, improves strength of the adductors, improves your single leg balance. And I've already posted this on YouTube previously, so let's just link it in the card section. Just click the little I, the info button, tap that, and head on over and check out that drill. I call it the one leg midline muscle activator, and you'll see why when you try that out. All right, so that's another reason why you might have Achilles tendonitis. The third reason is maybe your tibialis posterior is weak, but maybe also the feet, the intrinsic foot muscles, the sole of the feet, all those muscles are weak or dysfunctional. And if that's the case, then you just got to focus on those. And I've got a drill, and multiple drills, but I've done another video on YouTube for overpronation, where I talk about overpronation, which is related. And if you overpronate, you might have Achilles tendonitis as well. So I suggest you check out that video, because that's going to show you some exercises that will specifically target the intrinsic muscles of the foot, the bottom of the feet here. Okay, so those are three reasons why you might have Achilles tendonitis, and why stretching and standard exercise like calf raises aren't working for you. So if that's the case, follow the advice in this video and do all those exercises, and you might find your Achilles tendonitis resolves itself without actually focusing on the calves or the tendon itself. Okay, so if you do have any other problems with your knees, your ankles, your feet, and you want a more in-depth resource, I've created a course called Lower Limb Control, and you can check that out at the end of this video. Toss a link up here. Otherwise, hope this was informative for you. Hope you learned something, and more than that, I hope you take something away that's actually going to help you to move freely and without pain.